Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. Let's bust some fertility diet myths today. There is so much confusing and contradicting information on what to eat for fertility. Please keep this in mind. Medical doctors, OBs, REs all get an average of about 1 hour of nutrition in their training. So, no matter how many boards they are certified by, this doesn't change that they have very little, if any, understanding of how nutrition is really impacting your health and your fertility. They also just don't have the time to read the research in depth. So, I'm a registered dietitian with a master's degree in human nutrition, and we are supposed to be the experts in nutrition. But there is a lot that I had to unlearn from my conventional training. RDs that are conventionally trained learned very biased recommendations based on who has funded the research and the government nutrition guidelines. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of value in my education, learning about cellular metabolism, how nutrients impact genetic expression, how nutrients are involved in our detox system, how to read research, how to counsel clients, etc. I don't regret it. Perhaps one of the most important things my education taught me was to be wary of who funds certain research and where those general recommendations are coming from and how outdated they are. This is where my own critical thinking came in. Looking deeper into the research is important. If it doesn't make sense, there is a reason to keep learning. I chose to keep learning, to dive into functional medicine, women's health, and fertility, and it quickly became very clear that many of the general recommendations that RDs are taught to counsel on are very flawed. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics receives funding from manufacturers of ultra processed foods, and it owns stock in them. This is why the general nutrition recommendations put out by them are so flawed and why I do not support them. These recommendations also don't work in practice. So these same conflicts of interest are happening in the American Medical Association as well, and it impacts your care throughout your fertility journey. It can be so hard to find a team that really has your best interest in mind and isn't sold out to a protocol that is driven by massive conflicts of interest, but they are out there, and there are more of us all of the time. Okay, so let's get into the biggest fertility diet myths. The first one is that the Mediterranean diet is the best for fertility. This is one of the most common diets recommended for fertility. There are actually different versions of the Mediterranean diet that are used in the research, and most of them aren't even accurate to what is actually consumed in that region of the world. So when we think about what is recommended here in the US, it's really an Americanized version of the Mediterranean diet. There are major gaps in the Americanized Mediterranean diet that can actually hurt fertility long term. The first being limiting red meat, and the second being limiting full fat dairy. There's a lot of individualization that comes into play with what is best for fertility, but in general, the Americanized Mediterranean diet is not for long-term fertility support. Okay, calling a diet that is low in animal protein and fairly high in grains a Mediterranean diet and saying that it's the best for fertility isn't only inaccurate, it actually leads to more cycle problems, mainly a short luteal phase. This is the opposite of what we want for fertility. Remember that progesterone is queen of the luteal phase, supporting implantation of an embryo. If this phase is too short, implantation won't be successful. And if it happens to be successful, it can increase the risk of early loss. Check out episode 2 of season 1 for much more on progesterone. We do see improvements in the short term if switching from a diet that is high in processed foods to one that is much higher in whole foods, like the Mediterranean diet. However, if you are looking for long term benefits for egg quality and hormone balance that are going to support a healthy pregnancy and healthy baby, red meat, full fat dairy, and fish, and lots of plants and fats like olive oil can and should be included in your fertility diet. An emphasis on protein is really important. When we're trying to use primarily plants to meet protein goals, it's really easy to miss out on bioavailable nutrients that are crucial for supporting fertility in so many ways while sending our blood sugar on a roller coaster due to high carb and low protein intake. And this brings me right into the second fertility diet myth. Myth number 2. Red meat is inflammatory and should be limited. At this time, there is zero reliable data showing that meat and animal protein is bad for fertility. Did you know that many studies downplay or completely leave out the benefits of meat when they are concluding results? And many are poorly designed, prematurely categorizing meat as unhealthy prior to even doing the study. Only reading the abstract or the conclusion of a study can be very misleading if a study design or methods has been biased. This can even come through in the title of the study, making it seem as though plant protein is more supportive than animal protein. But if you take a closer look, you often find the opposite is true. For instance, in one study, the association between different proteins and IVF outcomes was looked at. In the conclusion of the study, it was stated that fish consumption was associated with increased chance of live birth via IVF. In reading the study, you find that red meat was shown to increase the chance of live birth to the same degree as fish. Yet this wasn't mentioned in the abstract or the conclusion, but only in the full text of the paper. Just relying on the researchers' takeaways doesn't tell the whole story, and most providers aren't reading the entire research study. Another large study that looked at ovulatory function and diet showed that women who are eating the most animal protein had the lowest rates of ovulatory infertility. Guess what? This result was only very briefly mentioned in the full text of the paper. But get this, women who ate the most meat were more likely to have other diet and lifestyle factors that decrease fertility outcomes, like higher alcohol intake and smoking. So it seems as though meat even has a protective effect on fertility. Okay, so if studies are misleading or flawed in their design, how do we really know if meat is good or bad? I like to take a step back and think about what ingredients, aka vitamins and minerals, support egg quality, ovulation, and pregnancy outcomes. High quality protein is so important for all of those things. B vitamins like B12 and B6, choline, folate, zinc, calcium, copper, iron, vitamin D, vitamin A, and fatty acids, just to name a few. Guess where all of these beautifully packaged up in nature? Meat and other animal proteins. We can't deny that these are the ingredients that support fertility, and they are found in animal protein. If you are thinking or someone has told you that these nutrients can all be found in plants, We can't forget that animal protein is higher quality, meaning more complete amino acids or protein building blocks and more bioavailable than plant protein. This means it's easier for your body to digest and use the forms of the nutrients that are in the animal proteins rather than the plant proteins. These nutrients are crucial for thriving fertility because they support things like DNA programming of the egg and the sperm, which is also known as the quality of the egg and the sperm, ovulation, lining health, and hormone production. The high quality protein and nutrients found in animal protein are crucial for optimal fertility. The quality of the meat does impact the nutrients as well. So, if you think about it, this shouldn't be surprising because if the animal ate and lived how it was biologically designed to, it is more nutrient dense. Beef from grass fed cows has 2 to 4 times more omega 3s, 7 times more vitamin A, and 2 times as much vitamin E, while having less exposure to antibiotics, pesticides, and toxins than conventional beef. This, however, does not mean that you should avoid meat if it is from a conventionally raised animal. You're still going to get more benefits from it than avoiding meat altogether. So, for all of the above reasons, a vegan and vegetarian diet is not ideal for fertility. We actually see irreversible developmental outcomes in baby when mom has been eating a vegetarian diet during pregnancy because many micronutrients are lacking or missing completely. And they're certainly less bioavailable, which impacts a quality brain development, and overall health of both mom and baby. The lower protein quality, the imbalance of fat intake, and the excessive fiber intake lead to a variety of cycle issues and fertility challenges. So, if you are concerned about the environmental impact of consuming animal foods, please explore Diana Rogers' work online and in her book, The Case for Better Meat, Sacred Cow. There's a lot of misinformation on this topic out there, and Diana's work is very reliable. All right, this brings us right into myth number 3. Dairy is inflammatory and has to be avoided for optimal fertility. Okay, so dairy is not something that everyone needs to optimize fertility, but it is associated with improved LH, which is luteinizing hormone, that hormone that signals ovulation, and improved testosterone levels in women. It actually seems to be protective against the common age related decline of anti Müllerian hormone or AMH. And women who consume high fat dairy have improved fertility and improved chance of live birth with IVF. Dairy, especially milk, can definitely contribute to GI discomfort, in which case it shouldn't be consumed, but I urge you to explore other full fat dairy products and think about the quality of the dairy that you're consuming because this can make a really big difference in how you are tolerating it as well. Choose full fat, grass fed, and organic. That can be very helpful for tolerance and taking it a step further. If you're able to choose raw, fermented, or A2 dairy, this can even better improve your tolerance of dairy. Dairy benefits fertility because it fills common nutrient gaps as a good source of nutrients like calcium, fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K2. And iodine is another big one that tends to be lacking unless seafood is frequently consumed. And dairy is a really good source of iodine. All of these nutrients are really important for blood sugar balance, reducing inflammation, and improving egg quality, as well as supporting thyroid function and reducing time to conception. Dairy is not inherently inflammatory, but how your body responds to it can be inflammatory. But this often has a lot to do with the quality of the dairy you're consuming and with your gut health. If you have underlying issues in your gut, dairy can trigger a reaction, but this is just alerting you to pay attention to your gut health. This is very important for overall nutrient absorption and immune system health. And there will be much more on gut health coming this season. So stay tuned for that. So these are the top 3 fertility diet myths that I hear. The Mediterranean diet is not the best for fertility. Do not limit red meat, and dairy often doesn't have to be avoided, it can even be very beneficial for fertility. So, if you are tired of all the misinformation and want to keep learning the real deal deets on how to support your fertility, please hit subscribe and keep following along. I'd also love to hear your questions, and please let me know what topics you want to learn more about. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.